Welcome to the Standard Issue podcast, Comedian Spring Day.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I don't often go in with questions about people's personal life first, but I saw that you got married in lockdown. You had one of those little 6-people weddings, and I was curious, were you planning a big wedding and you downgraded it, which I do know one person that did that, but I also know someone who got married because they said this is the perfect opportunity to not invite anybody and just get married. And I wondered which one of those two you were.
Well, it was going to be bigger. We were going to get married in the States, kind of like an outside wedding. And it turned out to work for the better because the day we had it, there was a big thunderstorm. And the time that we would have gotten married, there was a lightning bolt hit nearby tree, these kinds of things. So there probably would have been between 40 and 80 people under a tent.
Yeah.
Maybe a Kenny Rogers impersonator or something. But it was, I think it really did turn out for the better. We got to enjoy our wedding because we've been to weddings since, and we just sort of noticed, if you have a big wedding, it's really about everybody else. It's not really about you. And that's fine. But if you don't know that going in, I think my advice to anyone getting married is if this is about you, keep it small. If it's about the family, have different ceremonies and things. But, just be aware of who you're doing it for and how you want to do it.
Yeah.
'Cause it's not for you, a big wedding.
How was that time for you, given both you and your husband are disabled, and that was not a great time?
It was very scary. Neither of us have family in the UK. And so we... particular to me, I sheltered like a motherfucker because if he got sick, we'd be okay. Because I primarily, I am his caretaker in a way. But if I got sick, we were both screwed in a way that would be very uncomfortable. So I remember Tim did Live at the Apollo during that time. And I think it was just after... I can't remember if there were vaccinations available. I just know that I was a guard dog. I was because people, they're really excited. They're losing their minds that they're on TV. And I was just like, stay away from Tim. Stay away from Tim. I was like squirting people's hands with sanitizer and things. I had an incredible level of anxiety about, are we going to be okay? And we got our vaccinations as soon as possible. And all that sort of stuff, but I wasn't taking any chances whatsoever.
Listeners will hear that you are American. Tim is also American. I mean, I am quite disillusioned about how much this country cares about disabled people. But that said, I have always been really shocked when in America to see that, from my perspective, and that's as an able-bodied person, it looks worse. I don't know if it is worse, but it looks worse. I mean, the use of the word handicapped is always really shocking to me when I go to America still.
Well, that doesn't bother me as much as, say, if I'm receiving benefits and I get married, I lose them.
Wow.
And so I was always taught from a young age, do not apply for benefits, do not get benefits, because you will be treated as a second-class citizen. You will be treated as a burden on society. So we waited a long time to get married because I was afraid that if we did get married, Tim would lose his health benefits in the States. And I didn't want to be responsible for that. And we made sure that he wouldn't before we did. So, but that was one of the reasons we waited years, because we just weren't sure.
Yeah,
if that was going to be an issue.
What about accessibility? Is that better here or?
Oh, it's one of the reasons we both live here, because
really?
It's maybe because I don't know exactly why, but just the way things are built. For example, steps in the States are absolutely aerobic. Here they're kind of built for people used to have small feet. I don't know, these staircases, these ancient ones. There's more pavement here. In the States, you're expected to drive. I can't drive. The sort of things I need on my car are what you would get in a Back to the Future type thing. There was never any money for me to get a car, do all of those things. There wasn't any financial help in that way. And so I was like, well, I've got to go to a country. I've got to go live in a city that can accommodate someone that's never going to drive.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge decider in a lot of my career decisions and where I live.
Which is London now.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to ask you, are you looking forward to the new year? But I know you're going to be, because between the 6th and the 8th of January, your show, Exvangelical, is at the Soho Theatre. Now, you did it at Edinburgh this year.
I did.
Tell me how audiences responded to it then.
It got a really positive response. It's about me joining a Christian cult and getting out. I think if you were into cults, you found out about it and you were there. I talked to a lot of people that were involved in a similar church situation that I was in. You know, a lot of people said, yeah, you described I went through something similar in my childhood, or I know someone like this. A few people brought some teenagers, which I thought was an interesting choice. And I'm sure they had very interesting conversations about language afterwards. Overall, it was very positive, and it felt communal in the best sense of the word.
Yeah. People that are interested in cults, that's me. You're actually the third person that I've interviewed for Standard Issue who has been in a cult and left. Tracy King, who is a British writer whose parents joined an evangelical church when she was a teenager in this country, and the mighty Megan Phelps Roper, who left the Westboro Baptist Church, who was born into a cult. I was going to say not so much joined a cult, but was born into a cult. With you, you were a joiner.
I was joining, yeah.
Wonder what it is that you think the appeal is for you, or was for you, and whether you think that's universal. Because I think why I'm interested in them is I am interested in belief, what it is that people choose to believe and what they don't.
I think for me, I was 13 when I joined, and I was desperate to belong somewhere, and it was pretty obvious that my parents were not interested in being parents, and they had their own stuff, and parenthood didn't have any of the promises that they thought it might hold. They're not bad people, but they had their own issues. And this came around and they provided free childcare. I'd go over to the youth pastor's wife house after school, spend all day with them on Sunday. I'd go to their family reunions because their family was super religious, and I was supposed to see what a real family, a healthy family, worked and operated. They promised me that in my next life, in heaven, I'll have a perfected body. I'll find someone who loves God and that will love me, and all of these sort of things. And I thought I'd be a missionary abroad and grow God's kingdom and all of these things. And it gave me significance. It gave me sort of a facade of self-respect that I didn't actually have. I felt valuable. I felt, I was one of God's children. But then there's all this other stuff. There's the dark side of it, that you're constantly working out your own salvation and constantly scared of going to hell. But on the other hand, you're not really aware that it's possible for you to be an asshole.
Yeah.
Coming out of that and realize, I have been and can be quite an asshole. And coming to terms with that. But that doesn't mean I'm going to hell.
That's sort of a double whammy there, isn't it? Because you are a woman and women aren't supposed to be arseholes. And also you are a disabled woman and therefore you are supposed to be meek and grateful and vulnerable and all of those things. So yeah, embracing your inner arsehole is definitely something I think that we should all have a go at. So it's not to say we don't have cults over here. And we do, and people join them, and people leave here and go to America to join a specific cult. But it does seem, as an outside observer, that America seems more susceptible to a cult than a British person would be. And I wonder what you think that says about America, or why you think that is.
I think it's because the UK is much smaller. And you have to learn to get along with other people. And the way the rules are, the way society is, there's this sort of communal, like we have to think of other people whether we want to or not. And America's kind of too big for that. And so a part of the whole reason why America exists is that you have this mixture of optimism and sort of this Wild West, kind of it's where new ideas get made. But there's also this mysticism of the rugged individual. You don't need anybody else. And this is a complete and total myth, because you really can't get anywhere absolutely alone. And so I think that there's a lot of that. And there's, from what I've studied and from the training I've gotten coming out of it, that the more unstable your life is and the more uncomfortable you are with uncertainty, the more likely you are to join a fundamentalist or a cult-like situation, because you need that safety. And it is so easy to fall through the cracks like I did in the system. So by law, I should still have health insurance in America, but I don't. Because when I was a teenager, I didn't say the key words to the doctor.
Right.
That would say, yeah, you'll have insurance for the rest of your life. I was told, be as independent as you possibly can. I told the doctor I was independent. She said, okay, well, you don't need anything, I guess. And then I was off insurance. I wasn't told how to play the system the way I needed to play it to be taken care of. And so I learned not to trust other people. And I wanted to trust somebody, and these people said, trust us. Does that make sense?
It really does, because I think as well there's a sense of when you are uncertain. I used to have a long-standing joke was that I knew I was never going to get married. So I was going to need somebody to look after me in my dotage. So at that point I was going to become a nun, and then they would have to look after me but they actually, there's a top age that you can become a nun, and I have already passed it for precisely that reason, because they don't want people using it as a retirement plan, especially people like me who don't actually believe in anything.
Do you know why? I heard an interesting theory as to why they can't get married. Nuns and priests can't get married. Land. Yeah. You can't pass it on to your successors if you get married and have kids. It goes all to the church.
Yeah, that's a very good point. When the Reformation happened here, and then there was the Counter-Reformation for a bit, a lot of priests had been allowed to get married, but then we went back. And a lot of them just left their wives and kids, just accepted it and just went, yeah, all right then. Which always really shocks me. Mene. Obviously, comedy is therapy in a lot of ways. How has it been writing this and performing this? Does it feel, I don't want to use a religious expression like exorcising a demon, does it feel like that, or is it much more fun than that? Am I making it a bit too serious?
No. I think it is. It really is, for me, turning shit into fertilizer.
Is that a very Midwest expression?
I believe so. Well, it should be. I just don't feel like it's talked about enough when it comes to cults. Either, I was too clever to join, or my parents joined and I didn't have, it wasn't my choice. And when I got old enough, and, there's this sort of like, let's talk to the people that, like me, that, were vulnerable enough and optimistic enough to believe what was being sold. And then once you're in, going, oh, this isn't the bill of goods I was sold. This isn't going to work out. Giving people permission to graduate from something you used to believe, I think, is really important, and not feeling bad about it. You don't feel bad about, growing out of Sesame Street, and you shouldn't. And so I think people that are in it, they feel talked down to. I actually want people to leave that want to leave.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm trying to talk to people that were like me in that situation, or people that know people.
It's never one thing. We always have this idea that it's one thing that makes you go, no, that was the point, that was the turning point. But also it's about having the confidence to leave, but also when you leave, you're at that really vulnerable time of, what are you going to replace this with? What am I going to fill that bit of my soul with, And Tracy King basically said that she immediately went out of that and went straight into off-the-wall sort of political thinking and conspiracy theories, because you look for something else to fill it, and so it's a dangerous time. What was it like for you?
Well, for me, because my walk away was quite long. In the show, I make it sound quite short, but it took years and years.
Well, of course, because that's where your friends are, and that
I wouldn't say that's where my friends were. I'd say that's where the people outside of work lived. You know? Do you know what I mean? Because it's very transactional. It's sort of, you know, they're colleagues. They're your spiritual colleagues. These are people you're going to be hanging out with forever, literally. So I think for me, I was doing stand-up, and stand-up was helping me form my own opinions about things. And I was meeting people that were not believers. I was meeting gay people. I was meeting, you know, people that were into S&M, and they were talking about this and that. And I had to listen to people I didn't agree with. And I could see when they were kind. I could see when they weren't. I could see, they're just like the people, you know, some of the people I knew in church. I also saw how, like, people in church were dealing with things and how their faith made things harder to deal with, but they couldn't be honest about that because it was now their selling point in their testimony to convert other people. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem right. And so I was more open-minded, but I was also extremely aware that I was more vulnerable to joining another cult.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, you know, I'll stick with stand-up and I'll...
I mean, you have kind of joined another cult in a way, haven't you? The cult of stand-up.
It is. I've met people in New York who were doing stand-up and then they quit for a while and then they came back. And then other comedians said, if you quit again, I will never give you another spot. And it's like, you know what? If you quit stand-up and you do something else, I've never met anyone that quit stand-up and did something else that didn't go on to do something that they enjoyed doing and they had a successful life